I never thought we'd say we lit the family farm on fire, but here we are.
Trump decided he wasn't going to give us our farm check. That's fine. We're just going to burn the f***ing crops. Let everybody starve.
A field just burned to the ground in Nebraska. A soybean farm still smoldering in Kansas. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a wildfire. It was the farmer who lit the fire himself. Why? Because the harvest couldn't even cover the fuel for the tractor. Because no one's buying. Because letting the crops sit only means losing more. In America in 2025, the very fields that were supposed to feed the nation are being set ablaze acre by acre, as if that's the only way left to stop the bleeding. Farmers aren't counting seeds anymore. They're counting every dollar they might squeeze from crop insurance after another season abandoned. There's no war, no natural disaster, and yet some of the biggest agricultural regions in the US are going under. These are the 10 states where the flames sweeping across farmland are no longer signs of renewal, but a warning that collapse may be much closer than we think. Kansas. In the heart of America, Kansas was once the land of abundance where endless wheat fields stretched to the horizon and the sound of harvesters signaled hope for a better tomorrow. But in 2025, that sound has been replaced by the crackle of fire, the snap of scorched wheat stalks, and the wind whistling across empty farmland. Wheat prices have dropped below $5 a bushel, the lowest in years. For many farmers, harvesting means taking a loss. No one can afford to rent a combine. No one can pay to haul grain to the silo. So they choose the only option left: burn the fields, wipe away every trace of the season. According to the Kansas Department of Agriculture, over 1/5 of this year's wheat acreage has been destroyed, not by pests, not by storms, but because there are no buyers. Farmers are burning crops just to qualify for insurance payouts. It's legal, but it's gut-wrenching. A 58-year-old man in Salina told a local station, "I just don't have it in me anymore to watch the wheat grow, only to die in my hands." Stories like his are no longer rare. Across the central plains of Kansas, farmland is no longer a symbol of life. It's a graveyard for a system collapsing from the roots up. And the ripple effects reach far beyond the fences. A flour mill in Wichita is cutting capacity due to lack of grain. A packaging company in Hutchinson has canceled contracts with 3 local print shops. A rural bank just shut down a branch due to a wave of farm mortgage defaults. The most alarming part, no one is talking about next season anymore. Some families have put their land up for sale. Others have shifted to renting out their machinery. The rest are setting fires, quietly closing the final chapter of their lives as farmers. Kansas isn't dying overnight, but acre by acre, it's disappearing in silence. No alarms, no headlines. And if even the grain belt of America is retreating in flames, what's happening up north, where winters are harsher and debt has already pushed farmers beyond their limit? Nebraska. Nebraska has never been the center of national headlines, but it's always been a silent pillar feeding millions with corn, soybeans, and beef. In 2025, that silence remains, but it carries a different tone now, one of exhaustion, helplessness, and the quiet collapse of farms no one knows how to save. Since the beginning of the year, grain co-ops across the state have reported record-high inventories. Farmers can't sell their corn, and they can't afford to hire workers to harvest it. Many have left their fields untouched, but some have done the unthinkable, setting fire to them, not to prepare for a new season, but to cut maintenance costs and qualify for a small crop insurance payout. This is no longer an isolated phenomenon. An internal report from the University of Nebraska revealed that in the first 3 months of this year, the number of acres burned or abandoned has nearly doubled compared to the same period in 2024. Videos posted online show flames ripping through unharvested cornfields as if farmers are erasing the very traces of the work they once believed in. In Grand Island, a farm that won Farm of the Year back in 2019 now sits in ruins. Just a few rusted tractors and a crooked fence remain. The owner lost 2 straight corn seasons buried in bank debt and is now trying to sell the land for less than what he put into it. When asked why he didn't hold out for one more harvest, he simply said, "I can't let my son grow up surrounded by the rubble of my hope." Behind every scorched field is a ripple effect. A feed mill in Kearney has cut its workforce by 20%. A corn drying and storage company in Columbus has shut down operations entirely due to lack of supply. In small towns, people are beginning to see it clearly. When the land stops producing, everything else starts to rot with it. No one ever imagined Nebraska would become a symbol of the downfall of American agriculture. But this land, once considered the most stable, is now proving a harsh truth. When supply chains stall and buyers disappear, even the strongest ground can turn to ash. And now as Nebraska's cornfields fall silent, another land harsher, drier, once proud of its cattle and crops, is entering a far more brutal fight. Texas. If Nebraska is collapsing in silence, then Texas is collapsing from sheer exhaustion. Once a proud land of cornfields, hay bales, and the largest cattle industry in the country, Texas now finds itself caught in a brutal spiral, erratic rains, sudden floods, soaring input costs, and worst of all, a farm market that simply isn't responding. Across South and West Texas, ranchers have been forced to burn off pastures once used to feed their cattle just to avoid the rising costs of upkeep. With every acre that goes without water, farmers face a cruel dilemma: pay to save the grass or burn it to save the ranch. In the Rio Grande Valley, once hailed as the watermelon and citrus capital of Texas, entire rows of trees now stand blackened and brittle from drought. Irrigation systems have failed under the pressure. In some counties, water deliveries were slashed by 45% throughout March and April, making it impossible for growers to sustain their crops. The outcome: many resorted to the fastest, most desperate solution: clear it all with fire. Meanwhile, cattle ranchers are suffering a double blow: no grass to feed the herd, and no demand to sell the meat. Processing plants have cut capacity as market prices tank. More than 9,000 head of cattle were sold off in just 3 counties in West Texas, according to the state's Department of Agricultural Resources. A rancher in Amarillo told a local paper, "I'm not burning because I want to. I'm burning because I can't stand watching this land die quietly." Then he got on his tractor and drove out to the field, just like so many others choosing to set free the only asset they've spent their lives building. Now the pain is rippling beyond the fields. Workers in packaging plants, cold storage facilities, and transportation hubs are starting to feel the squeeze. A produce logistics company in Lubbock cut 40% of its delivery routes due to lack of supply. A livestock feed plant in El Paso temporarily shut down after orders dropped by more than half. Texas doesn't know how to surrender, but in a land once defined by sun grit and red soil, symbols of endurance, what remains now are darkened plains, scorched grass, lifeless trees, and people who no longer have anything left to hold on to. But while Texas farmers are burning their way through despair farther west, another region once fueled by rich soil and high-value exports is now facing a very different kind of shock. California. California has long been known as America's golden fruit basket, producing over 13% of the nation's total agricultural value. But in 2025, a different reality is taking root. Almond orchards, vineyards, citrus groves are being left behind. Not because farmers have forgotten how to grow, but because they no longer have a reason to keep going. The cost of irrigation has surged by over 40% compared to last year, according to data from the California Farm Bureau. Amid an unrelenting drought across the Central Valley, many growers are forced into an impossible choice: pour money into keeping the crops alive or tear them out and cut their losses. For many, the answer is clear. And to save time and money, they burn it all. In Fresno and Kern County, California's almond capital's hundreds of acres of mature orchards have been chopped down, piled up, and set ablaze. No ceremony, no press release. Just pale columns of smoke rising under the midday sun from what once fed thousands of families. A 2025 report from UC Davis shows almond exports have dropped nearly 30% since 2023, especially to premium markets in Europe. With maintenance costs skyrocketing and no stable buyers in sight, many farmers have come to one painful conclusion: keeping the trees means sinking deeper into debt, so they walk away from the land itself. And it's not just almonds. The vineyards of Sonoma and Napa are telling the same story. At least 5 small wineries have sold their grape fields to cover mounting debts. Some vineyards were even burned before harvest season began, just to avoid the cost of keeping them alive a few weeks longer. The ripple effects are spreading. Bottling plants in Modesto cut their workforce by 25% in Q1. An organic food packaging company in Sacramento announced a temporary shutdown of 2 lines dedicated to fruit products. A logistics firm that once shipped California's organic produce to the Northeast has posted back-to-back quarterly losses because there are no more contracts to fulfill. California used to be a point of pride where the Made in the USA label meant organic, premium, world class. But now those very brands are going up in smoke alongside the scent of scorched almond wood and grapes that never made it to the barrel. And as the ashes of California's almond groves still smolder nearly 2,000 miles east, the cornfields are going quiet too. No smoke there. But make no mistake, there's fire. Iowa. If California was America's gourmet table, then Iowa was always its kitchen. But that's all in the past now. Iowa remains the top producer of corn and soybeans in the U.S. Yet a cruel irony has emerged. Corn stockpiles in Q1 of this year hit their highest level since 2017, even as prices plummeted. According to the USDA, the average price of corn at the start of the year was just $4.35 per bushel lower than what many farmers spent to grow it. With no good options left, many farmers across central and northern Iowa made a heartbreaking decision they didn't harvest. Instead, they let the corn dry out and die in the fields, and then set it ablaze. Not out of anger, but because burning was cheaper than paying for combines transportation and accepting rock-bottom prices. In counties like Cerro Gordo and Hancock, the usual sights and sounds of harvest season, roaring engines, swirling dust, have been replaced by eerily quiet fields and dark, smoldering smoke. Burn down is no longer just a technical term, it's a survival tactic. Data from Iowa State University shows that nearly 17% of soybean acreage in the region was either abandoned or destroyed mid-season, largely because yields couldn't cover even the basic costs. For farmers who had invested in quality seed fertilizers and modern equipment, walking away was gut-wrenching, but nobody could afford to borrow more for a game with no payoff. The ripple effect is spreading fast. A farm co-op in Fort Dodge laid off workers due to insufficient crop volume. A major ethanol plant in Mason City announced a shutdown not from oversupply, but from a shortage of corn, something unheard of in recent years. Equipment dealers across the region reported a 38% drop in Q1 sales. Worse still, the strong sense of rural community that once defined Iowa is starting to fracture. Co-op meetings are nearly empty. For sale signs line the highways. People don't talk about the harvest anymore. They talk about when they'll walk away from the land. Iowa hasn't gone up in flames like the western states, but the cold taking root in the hearts of its farmers may be even more dangerous. It spreads slowly, silently, and burns through every last bit of hope. Illinois. By mid-April, while most of America was easing into planting season, vast stretches of farmland in central Illinois remained bare, lifeless, and untouched. Not because of bad weather, not because of pests, but because their owners had made a hard decision to plant nothing at all. This wasn't laziness, it was cold calculation. Invest in seed fertilizer fuel, only to sell at prices that don't even cover the cost of operations. These farmers are no longer gambling with the land, they're letting it rest. In some cases, they're even torching what little they had already planted, cutting losses before the season begins. According to the Illinois Farm Bureau, fallow acreage in counties like Logan, Sangamon, and Christian rose nearly 13% compared to early 2024, marking the highest level in over a decade. And these aren't barren lands. These are prime fields for high-quality soybeans, once a crown jewel of America's agricultural supply chain. In the western part of the state, where some farms had experimented with sustainable practices, a growing trend known as early field clearing, plowing under or burning crops at the initial growth stage, is picking up speed. The reasons are clear: no guaranteed contracts, unstable commodity prices, and quarterly debt payments to the bank. For these farmers, keeping a crop alive for a few more weeks just means dragging out the debt. The shockwaves are spreading fast. A harvesting equipment supplier in Peoria reported a 30% drop in orders. A livestock feed plant in Decatur shelved its expansion plans. Rural banks across the region are seeing a surge in debt restructuring requests, a red flag that growers are running out of cash to keep going. Illinois doesn't need a storm to break its agricultural cycle. A quiet wave of decisions not to plant, not to harvest, not to reinvest is already draining life from the Midwest. And when even the most advanced farmers are forced to stop, the question isn't, what happened? It's who's left to keep going. And while the heartland fields fall silent farther south along the Illinois River, once hailed as a strategic corridor for grain and pork, a quieter kind of downsizing is beginning to take shape. Missouri, not as loud as California, not as prominent as Iowa, but Missouri has always been a quiet cornerstone of American agriculture, home to pork, corn, soybeans, and cattle. Yet in 2025, across a state once proud of its 95,000 farms, a strange new pattern is emerging: flames and emptiness. Not part of any growing season, but now more common than ever. Why export contracts are stalling. The domestic market is clogged with surplus. Corn prices have sunk so low that planting more no longer makes financial sense. Rather than spend more to harvest a crop nobody wants, farmers are tearing it out, and in some cases they're setting entire fields ablaze, not in protest, but as a way to call it quits early. Down in the Boot Heel region, where rich alluvial soil once gave Missouri a competitive edge, dozens of corn and soybean fields were cleared in just days. A report from the Missouri Department of Agriculture noted that over 10% of farmland in the state's southeast is being returned to the earth, a softer way of saying crops are being destroyed mid-season. And it's not just the crops. Livestock operations are hurting, too. Feed prices are up, hog prices are down, and many farms are being forced to sell off young animals or drastically shrink their herds. A slaughterhouse in Springfield cut production by 2/3 in just the first quarter, citing a lack of supply and a 40% drop in new orders. Meanwhile, equipment suppliers in Columbia say financed purchases have nearly stopped. No one wants to take on more debt in a game that keeps losing. What makes Missouri's crisis especially dangerous is its quiet pace. There's no single collapse, no dramatic turning point. Just farmer after farmer, family after family, co-op after co-op, quietly stepping away. No bankruptcy filings, no cries for help. Just disappearing day by day from the agricultural map. And when even Missouri, the bridge between farming, livestock, and logistics, has to torch its crops to stay afloat, then further southeast, in a region once celebrated as a model of sustainable agriculture, another reckoning is already taking shape, where even faith in farming no longer feels certain. North Carolina. North Carolina has never ranked among the top producing agricultural states, but it has always played a special role in American farming, thanks to its rich biodiversity, mild climate, and a cultivation tradition that stretches back centuries. In 2025, though, part of that legacy is being worn away, 1 square foot at a time. In the cotton and soybean growing regions of eastern North Carolina, this year's planting season began with a noticeable hesitation. Not because of bad weather, but because there simply weren't enough farmers in the fields. According to the North Carolina Department of Agriculture, over 14% of growers in the Tidewater and interior regions delayed their spring planting plans, the highest rate since 2009. Why the biggest reason is the rollback or delay of sustainable farming support programs caused by a reshuffling of the state's budget. Grants that once helped small farmers experiment with organic cotton, reduce pesticide use, or transition towards circular agriculture are gone. Without that financial cushion, many families just can't hold on, especially with commodity prices continuing to fall. In just the first 3 months of the year, more than 1,700 acres of cotton were abandoned mid-season, mainly because growers lacked the funds to manage pests or pay for harvesting equipment. Some opted to clear fields mechanically. Others, cutting costs to the bone, burned what was left of their crops, with scattered fires reported across the coastal plain. The ripple effects have been widespread. Cotton buyers in Greenville announced a 40% cut in operations due to supply shortages. A textile mill in Wilson laid off 25 workers and shut down 1 production line. The regional agi transport industry saw its lowest shipment volume since 2016, and it's not just the large operations. Even the small family farms, those built on mixed model systems of chickens, cotton, and vegetables, are pulling back. They have no financial buffer, no large-scale crop insurance. With input costs up 20 to 30% and buyer demand slowing down, everything begins to collapse like dominoes. North Carolina isn't burning, but the quiet erosion of support programs paired with drained financial reserves is pushing farmers to let go, not because they've lost hope, but because they no longer have the capital to hope at all. Maine. Maine was never known for massive agricultural output, but it once stood as a symbol of a different path, sustainable local farming rooted in nature and community. Small farms growing strawberries, organic vegetables, and free-range chickens were celebrated as model systems for the future of American agriculture. Yet in 2025, it's these very model farms that are falling first. This collapse isn't driven by global markets, it's happening from within. According to data from the Maine Farmland Trust, over 18% of small farms in the state have shut down or temporarily suspended operations in the first quarter of the year. The main culprits: cuts to local agricultural support programs, labor shortages, and skyrocketing input costs that have pushed many beyond their limits. Unlike the Midwest, there are no mega farms here. A few acres can represent an entire family's livelihood. But when agricultural insurance premiums climb above 12% of projected product value, when prices for organic produce at local markets drop due to weaker demand, many small growers are choosing to walk away. Some are even selling their land to real estate firms just to pay off equipment loans. In a last-ditch effort, some farmers have burned moldy crops left unharvested not out of neglect, but because there were no buyers, no functioning logistics chains to get the food to market on time. Once prized rows of kale mulberries and organic carrots have been reduced to charred black patches in the soil. The social ripple is unavoidable. Farmers markets in Portland and Kennebec are closing early for lack of product. The Agricultural Training Center in Bangor has canceled classes due to low enrollment. In coastal towns, cold storage warehouses once used to preserve fresh produce are now being rented out for events just to cover overhead. There's no violence, no conflict, no dramatic wildfires, but the retreat in Maine feels like a cold burn where a future once cultivated with trust and intention is now being smothered by rising costs and the collapse of a support system that no longer exists. And if even this model of kind agriculture can't survive in the heart of America, then farther northwest in a land long shaped by hardship, where people once took pride in conquering nature itself, another reckoning is quietly beginning to unfold, in a far more ominous way. Montana. Montana was never a headline maker when it came to everyday consumer crops. But make no mistake, this state has long been a cornerstone of the hard wheat and livestock feed, supply chain feeding everything from national bread lines to the federal beef industry. The problem in 2025, there's still plenty of land in Montana, but fewer and fewer people left to work it. Unlike other states scorched by man-made fires, Montana's farms are withering from something quieter, erratic, weather and market apathy. According to the Montana Wheat Association, harvested acreage in Q1 dropped nearly 15% year over year, mostly because farmers simply couldn't offset rising input costs with current prices. With wheat selling for under $5 per bushel, growers in the Golden Triangle began ripping out young crops just weeks after planting. Many realized they couldn't even afford the fuel for their combines, let alone the cost to dry and haul grain across state lines in search of buyers. Some chose the fastest path forward: burn it down, restore the soil, and wait for next season, if they can even afford another shot. In eastern Montana, where grassland farms once supported tens of thousands of cattle, ranchers are now facing their third drought in 4 years. The pastures are dry, water is scarce, feed prices have nearly doubled. For many, raising livestock is no longer feasible. Some families have made the tough call to send the cattle off the mountain, either selling off entire herds or transferring them out of state in a desperate attempt to cut losses. What makes Montana's crisis especially troubling is the distance, both literal and figurative, between its farmers and any kind of meaningful support. There's no strong network of community banks, no tailored safety net for extreme geography, and so one by one, people walk away from the land. In small towns like Havre and Glasgow, you'll see shuttered equipment shops, moving trucks heading out, and grasslands along the highways slowly falling into neglect. No one calls it an agricultural collapse, but if you look long enough, you'll see it happening 1 acre at a time, one ranch at a time. Montana doesn't need a financial meltdown to collapse. What's unfolding here is a slow, steady retreat, one that no one seems able to reverse. Because in a system built on resilience, when belief is worn down long enough, even the toughest land begins to crack. 10 states, 10 snapshots of a bitter reality where Americans are no longer farming to survive, but burning their own fields just to survive with fewer losses. No one wants to see fire instead of harvest. But when the system no longer protects the hands that feed the nation, burning it down sometimes feels like the only rational move left. So the questions remain. If these fields are burning in silence, who will speak up? Who will risk investing in land when land no longer yields returns, but only debt? And most of all, who will grow America's food when even the strongest among us are forced to let go? This video does not promote division or secession. All content is intended for exploration analysis and to spark conversation around real events, emotions, and societal trends. We respect the U.S. Constitution and all federal laws. If you found this video insightful, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you won't miss the stories that mainstream media often leaves untold.